Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TopCyberPro podcast. I'm founder and CEO Jim West, and I'm here with another great guest, and we're going to talk about a really important topic that you might have heard about, but you may have been confused and not fully understand it, and that's what this guest is here today. So I have Yoad, and again, the name is Fekete. No, that's Spanish sounding,
Great.
but close
No,
enough.
no, yeah, that's
That's good. So
amazing.
I have Yoad here, who is an expert in DevSecOps. He actually started a business to help do secure software development, and he does a lot more. He's worked for Microsoft. He's worked for a lot of other interesting businesses, and has some unique experiences in the industry. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Yoad to kind of introduce himself and talk about the work he does in industry.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I have a long experience in infrastructure, DevOps, and DevSecOps. About 15 years in the industry. I started from the prehistoric era where people actually pushed servers into racks and connected cables all across in order to actually being able to deploy an application, and then understood like people understand today with AI that eventually it's going to replace them. So I understood that data centers are kind of reserved for the AWS or Azure's GCP of the world, and now I need to transfer to DevOps and slowly migrate it to cloud. I've worked for RSA Security, a bunch of startups, um, Microsoft, and the government as well. But yeah, that's about me in a nutshell.
Wonderful. When we hear DevSecOps, could you maybe just give us, from your perspective, the definition of what it is, and then maybe kind of go into the different facets that comprise DevSecOps?
Ooh, that's a Pandora box you opened.
Yeah.
Uh, so Dev DevSecOps in general is incorporating security into the DevOps process. And DevOps basically means that we're doing continuous iteration all over the development life cycle and automation. So basically, since we started with DevOps and now we no longer have kind of this perceptive of we're going to develop and maybe release a version sometimes. We keep iterating, continuous testing, continuous integration, continuous deployment. All of those continuous iterations need security testing as well, right? Because what we used to do is do once or twice a year penetration testing, and that will be our vulnerability assessment. Now we do those things like to comply with SOC 2 because it's still there. But if you look at the like current kind of life cycle of for development, um, we already have a lot of those things that we are doing in the annual penetration testing happening in our pipeline, right? We check our code security, we check our open source security, we do dynamic testing on API, we have API security, whole bunch of tools that integrate security into the workflow. And that's part of application security, which is a broader topic of what is application security and what from application security needs to be incorporated into the DevSecOps lifecycle. So that's kind of, in 1 minute.
Yeah. Well, that's a great explanation. Usually, when I'm talking to folks that are like trying to wrap their heads around it, I'll say, hey, imagine like you're building a car and there's going to be a lot of safety tests, inspections along the process of taking the car from the conveyor belts to putting the doors on, the engine in. There's a lot of what I call QA/QC checks, quality assurance, quality control. And it's the same thing when you're developing software and applications because nowadays, we had all these models of like the waterfall and the cascading, and then we had the continuous, iterations of continuous application security improvement. But now, there's, certain teams can be so massive. Let's say Microsoft is developing a new operating system. They got a whole team of folks just doing driver support. Another team just working on just what they call modular coding, where different teams are working on different parts of what the whole product is. And even when those parts come together, there's certain testing that has to be done because as you assemble and put this code together, you could potentially create weaknesses. Like the parts could be tested, but when you put them together, where they come together becomes very critical to, scan and and QA/QC that. So I tell it's much like assembling a car. When you're building an application, you have to do your checks all along the way. So I know it's a great thing for industry to have this because we're trying to eradicate as many flaws and vulnerabilities before it goes to the marketplace that causes lots of outages. So speaking of outages, you have a very unique experience. Not to go too far off topic, but it is related. You worked as part of an incident handling response on a pretty significant Microsoft incident. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So well, it's been much broader than Microsoft. Well, in the SolarWinds incident that happened,
Yes.
2020 to 2021. So, at least rumorly, 18,000 companies has been impacted by the bridge, right? Those were SolarWinds customers, and and Microsoft was one of the customers. It's not a secret, and I think a lot of teams within Microsoft did incident response internally to understand, okay, were we impacted? So we did the same, right? We looked in our environment, we rotated everything we needed to do. We made sure that no sensitive information was extracted. We made sure that, our infrastructure is safe. Um, but post that, and part of that I was part of that incident response. Um, that kind of was my enlightening moment for the company because um, regularly I spend 50% of my time on security, like on vulnerabilities and daily security handling and response. But that was one of the things that I said. If something like that were to happen to Microsoft itself tomorrow, like if Microsoft were to be like the next SolarWinds or one of the open source that Microsoft were using, uh, would we be protected? And the answer was no, because there is no such tool. And this is why, I wanted to start and build something that can do that. So that's kind of the story plus.
Hmm. So can you talk a little bit about the company you founded and what the mission is for this company?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the we had two big missions. One is on the detection or attacks front side. We said, okay, we're going to protect an organization from software supply chain attacks. What is a software supply chain attack? Log4j is not a supply chain attack. Log4j is a 0-day of vulnerability that could be exploited to a software supply chain attack. But so I see software supply chain attacks as intentionally malicious code or package or intruder in the organization that trying to attack a company that eventually delivers software to thousands, hundred thousands of customers. So we've seen that with SolarWinds, seen that with Jump Cloud incident, XDUTLs that just happened, the Loti that happened a week ago, um, and 3CX that happened as well. So we wanted to build something that can handle attacks, malicious code that doesn't have any CVE, detect those both on the binary level and the source code level, both on CI/CD and open source. So this was the first mission, and that's kind of protecting from attacks that can demolish your brand and
Mhm.
financial. But the second thing is the daily life, right? You'll ask engineering and application security engineers, and they will tell you probably the same four things. So we have, or three, if I'm putting the supply chain attacks aside. It's we have an alert fatigue, right? We have tons of vulnerabilities. Um, are they relevant? If so, which is relevant to deal with first? Second thing would be how do we remediate? So the tool told us that we need to fix, but how? How is it going to impact us? How much time will it take? Because and those things eventually are backed or caused like kind of a miscommunication between security and engineering because there's no context. So this was the mission of the company, like to bring context to the daily work, like the what we have to deal with daily, and to make sure also that developers wouldn't bring anything to the organization that might hurt, eventually, or bring malicious packages or intention through the development lifecycle.
Okay. So you mentioned there about the context, right? Which, I always tell people context is everything, right? So in context of trying to help, identify vulnerabilities, try to come up with maybe timelines on patching or to resolve, any kind of flaw that's been identified. How does things like threat intelligence, with the, there's like the Centers of Threat Informed Defense, there's MITRE ATT&CK framework. There's a lot of this information out there where companies are sharing more and more about attacks they're seeing in the wild. And I know sometimes these cyber attacks are more infrastructure focused or network focused. But what about when things that are attacking, such as, you mentioned everything's developed on cloud. So you have to also consider there's a caveat, which I've had episode one of season three. It was Dr. Spina from MITRE talking about caveat and like it's focused on cloud attacks. And of course, I
Yeah.
had a couple other folks like I had John from the Centers of Threat Informed Defense also on the podcast to talk about how the industry and different companies are collaborating. Does any of that come into the DevSecOps world?
Yeah, definitely, because um, the way enterprises work is that they have policy set, right? So you can either set a policy by defining what you want to fix. So, you'll find in most organizations it will be highs and criticals and exploitable. And where do you get exploitable data from? Bunch of public databases like NVD, for example. Um, so the second thing would be to correlate that with the compliance framework that the organization need to adhere to. So um, you're using data from MITRE for once, and then let's say I need to be SOC 2 compliant, right?
Mhm.
And if I have a vulnerability, a higher critical for more than, I don't know, 30 days, let's say, for example, I'm not longer SOC 2 compliant.
Mhm.
If I have a secret that I didn't rotate, I'm not longer SOC 2 compliant. Same for ISO and SSDF and a lot of other frameworks that, we have health organizations that need to comply with some other, or PCI DSS for financial institutions. So all of those are tightly coupled with application security for sure. And you can definitely, and that's what we do, correlate the findings with those frameworks.
Wonderful. Now, how would like, right now, everybody and anybody in industry, all you hear about every conference I've been to all of this year, and I spoke at many conferences. I'd say 8 out of 10 topics. And don't get me wrong, I love the technology, I love emerging technology, but sometimes industry can go way overboard with embracing the technology, and AI has been the biggest buzzword in every event. And 8 out of 10 topics on their agenda are AI, 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 and we hear it every day. It's shoved down our throats. I get it. But in regards to the software supply chain risks that AI could have impact on, what are your insights and perspectives on it? Will AI pose increased risk or exponential risk to software supply chain risk?
Yes and no. Um, yes, because auto-generated code might bring malicious code, right? Usually when we speak about developers that write code, they might they might do a mistake, right? They might write something that is vulnerable by mistake, not intentionally, unless we have an internal intruder. So I'm putting that scenario aside. If we look at generative code, we have two scenarios. One, or three. You know what? Three. One is that, of course, there's a chance that the AI model would bring vulnerable code, but it can also bring malicious code, right? We don't know, what it's been trained on. Second thing would be um, it can bring malicious packages because when we tell the code, listen, I need to do API calls. Can you do 1, 2, 3? So it will also use an external library. Most likely, it will bring a well-maintained library that is very famous, like request, for example, in Python, right? But you can never know what's going to happen. So that's something that you need to verify. The controls are the same, by the way, so far. And then the third thing is So there's the security for AI and AI for security. But now the third thing is, am I using AI in my code, like models? And that's a new risk factor that we need to deal with. It's not the traditional code anymore. Um, and models are a totally different thing. The models SBOM is a totally different thing. So that's another different area. Definitely part of application security and other factors as well that you need to take into consideration as part of the platform for sure.
Okay. So when we talk about software supply chain risk, what can you give us some examples? Because a lot of folks are scratching their heads like they think of supply chain as, like you said, supplies on a grocery store shelf, because of the pandemic. There was a lot of shortages of different supplies. There were shortages of the computer chips that go into cars and everything. So there's just shortages, and they think of the physical
Yeah.
items in our lives when they think of supply chain, because supply, you think of something physical. So what is some examples of what a software supply chain risk is?
So I think the best scenario would be to do it by example. And well, two examples, right? Let's take the most simple one, and then a sophisticated attack that's been executed by nation state actors. So the simpler one would be, developers when they work on their IDE, like VS Code, for example, which is very famous these days. They use extensions to adhere to which language they use, etc. So we have extensions for everything. The most prominent example for an extension is most developers you need to do like developer in dark mode, right? Otherwise, they're not developers. And then you have an extension for that. So one of the nicest kind of attacks, so it wasn't really an attack, it was a simulation that worked really well for the guys that did that. They actually uploaded a malicious like extension. What it does, the same thing basically. So it will turn your IDE to dark mode, but in addition, it will extract all of the code from your tabs that you open, right? And we all can agree that that's sensitive information, and it will send it over to the server. So why is it a supply chain? Because I created an extension which is malicious. I put it on the marketplace. I won't go into the details right now on why it wasn't detected and how they did it. But then you put it in one place, and then you get to tons of other customers, many companies.
Yeah.
Um, and the second thing is the 3CX attack, which is a double supply chain attack. So an employee downloaded an already malicious software. Then the attacker got into the organization, traversed all the way to the build system, injected malicious code over there, and then 3CX has 600,000 customers across the world. All of those were impacted, and that's a sophisticated attack, well targeted, well computed, definitely done by a nation state actor. So those are kind of the two edges of how you can execute what is a software supply chain attack and how you can execute it in a very simple manner and a very sophisticated manner.
What would be some resources? So if there anyone watching this that has, let's say, an executive, a manager, director that has a team of developers, what would be some resources that they should be checking on to sure that their teams are following like standards or guidelines? Is there a nonprofit that kind of guides that sector of industry that you would recommend?
Yeah, so there are a lot of resources. I think one of the most comprehensive that I've seen is the NIST SSDF Secure Software Development Framework, and it includes a bunch of factors of how to develop security, which control should be in each of the software development lifecycle, and they do not recommend specific vendors, right? They just tell you you need to do 1, 2, and 3, and so it's very vendor agnostic, and I really liked it. I think the guys did a lot of like really intensive work there.
Very fantastic work by them, and I love the term vendor agnostic because you're not just promoting one or the other.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Um, This is one of my favorite questions I like to ask my guests, Yoad. If we was to get into a time machine and go back in time to the first day where a younger version of yourself said, "Hey, I want to do IT, cybersecurity. This is where I want to take my career." What's the story of that day one for you?
Wow. I think the story would be, the cliche of I've been disassembling, things from age 3, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I just love it. I always loved computers. I always loved understanding how things work behind the scenes. That's why I'm very privileged to be still a part of the generation that actually connected cables in order to deploy an application. Today, when we interview here, like DevOps engineers, if you'll ask them about like to troubleshoot a network issue, they will tell you, you do this in AWS, but you're trying to get them to behind the scenes of, what's the actual network problem, right? And then you try to take them back. So I think that was one of my incentive. And the second thing, I was partially a musician, and musician doesn't bring food to the table, so I had
What
to choose.
instrument?
Well, that's the problem. It was everything but pretty moderate. So I started with classical piano and then moved to guitar and drums, but I never took anything all the way like seriously. And I'm too old for that. So
You're
it
never
is what
too
it
old to
is.
enjoy music.
Exactly, to enjoy for sure.
To enjoy. Along your career, has there been like people that you've admired, looked up to, inspired you, or people that may have even mentored you along your career that you'd like to kind of pay homage to?
Yeah, I think and this is something that I'm taking on my daily journey with our employees and my colleagues and my friends and everything in general. I think is living by an example and doing and like doing hands-on and living with empathy and looking on the person that actually works for you. So my managers always looked on how they can promote me, not necessarily in a promotion financial way, but how can they make me learn more, um, look at my future, look at my benefits. So I was very lucky to be guided by very talented, very humble, very empathetic people that always looked at me as a target for to improve and to make sure that I get to the place that I want. And this is what guides me today as well. Um, yeah, and I think it's a lot of things we get from home as well, right? So, my father was the same, so I really try to kind of gather that and implement that on my daily as well.
Okay, wonderful. What is I guess a good question would be if someone wanted to start learning about DevSecOps. I know you mentioned the NIST document for the general guidance, but is there a site or a resource where people can actually get some training on it, or a YouTube channel or person you would recommend that they could follow and watch?
Um, so I would say that the best way to learn, if you want a career in that, so it depends. If
Mhm.
you're
Yeah.
outside of cybersecurity, I would say start with SOC. Go work at a SOC team. You'll get a lot of information. Usually, you will see SOC in bigger companies, so it will give you the opportunity to grow and move to different teams, right? Um, and if you do the usual transition for to devs, SecOps or application security would be from either the development side or the DevOps side. That makes things easier, right? You're in a company, there's a shortage of talent. I say learn by doing. The YouTube channels, the information online is good, but eventually when you
You
come
gotta
to
get your hands
implement,
on.
exactly, you need to get the hands-on. So I think that's the best way. Um, Leave the trainings aside. It's always good like to watch things, but I think what I learned is, get a mentor, like somebody from the company that can guide you through that.
Okay. I know we could talk all day about cyber and so forth, and I want to respect your time. So this is the part of the podcast where I like to ask a couple, what I call a couple speed round questions. There's no right or wrong answers, just the first answer that comes to your mind. And it's just for some levity to have a little bit of fun on the podcast. So if you're ready, I'll hit you with some rapid fire questions.
Go for it.
All right, this one divides the room, okay? Star Wars or Star Trek?
Wow, I'm sorry. I haven't, I'm so bad at movies. I didn't even watch The Matrix. So I'm
Wow.
so, listen, I'm the worst kind of, interviewee for that.
No worries, no worries. Okay, then we'll go to the next question. Cake or pie?
Oh, pie.
Pie. What kind of pie?
I'm at the age of apple pie.
Apple pie. Okay, apple pie is always the golden standard. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes, of course.
Okay, hot dog sandwich. Okay. What has been your most favorite book of all time that you've read, and what was the last book you've read?
Um, so I actually, what I do is that, since, lack of time, I started doing like podcasts. So I don't know if people know Blinkist or other kind of books. So 5 a.m. Club was the last book I listened to. Um, and while I highly recommend it, I think there are two kind of people, and you tell me yourself that eventually you can either wake up at 5 or not. So I didn't implement that, but I really like kind of the thesis behind that. Um, but I think what I would recommend that, people are like in a red race today, choose what you kind of like and do like audio podcast. That's my favorite.
Awesome. Well, when you mentioned wake up at 5, I'm usually up till 4 or 5 in the morning, so I'm kind of,
Same here. Same
yeah,
here.
I'm up all night. Um, I know that you do a lot of work in running your business and so forth, and doing the things that you do within the industry, and we thank you for being in our industry. But my question is, when you're done with the office, is there, whether it's yourself doing the work or do you support whether through your time, your energy, financially, is there any nonprofits, charities, volunteer work, or just organizations that you want to kind of shine a light on?
Yeah. So I've always been a cat lady. So my daily activity. I mean, I apologize for everybody that hates cats because I know most of the world are dog people, but I feed cats and we have a big problem of like stray cats in Israel. So I take care of that. I spay the cats, in my city, in my neighborhood, and we're trying to get, just get the population done because
Yes.
um, I still believe till this day that, animals are still kind of they are the good part of the world that, no politics, just, the regular old school
Yeah.
fights, right? But over food, but not over like power to control money. So
No, I think
I
the
respect
internet
them.
would love that. I mean, I think if anything, the internet's going to have a problem that you don't know Star Wars or Star Trek
Oh
or the
my God. Oh my
Matrix.
God.
But no,
Yeah.
that's a worthy, wonderful cause there. Before we wrap up, I want to just kind of give you kind of what I call the final word. So, for anyone watching this that has any kind of stake or invested interest into DevSecOps and software supply chain risk, what is the message that you want to leave with those folks that are interested in it or they're doing it, but they might want to get your perspective on it? What would be your final word on it?
Just hit me up. I'm really, really happy to discuss, help people. On every conference I go, I always register for the kind of guiding new people that looking for a cybersecurity career. So please, I'm available on LinkedIn and I'm happy to advise. I usually learn a lot myself from those kind of interactions. So I think that will be that.
No, wonderful. Well, all of the links he mentioned the NIST document. So, Yoad, if you would send me the NIST link to that, I think we you might have mentioned some other resources. Please provide all those to me so that you don't have to Google it. you watching, you just click the description below. I'll also include Yoad's LinkedIn profile so you can follow him and the great work that he's doing in industry. So with that, Yoad, thank you so much for giving of your time today to kind of give us a little bit of insight into what these terms mean. Because a lot of folks that are brand new to hearing this, they make assumptions, but that the problem is assumptions doesn't help us in our reality. So it's good to kind of get this insight from you and to learn a little bit about it and then continue them with the links that you'll provide. That's in the description below, folks. So again, Yoad, thank you so much for your time, and that has
Thank
been our
you.
episode.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.